week on the Omi Show, I'm excited to welcome economic growth expert Victor Hwang. Victor is the founder and CEO of Victor & Company, an economic growth consultancy, and also the founder and CEO of Right to Start, a campaign fighting to expand entrepreneurial opportunity for all. Hwang is a major ecosystem builder whose dynamic ideas have shaped the economic lives of millions of people worldwide, including mine. Okay, so I'm so excited to have you here with me, Victor. Welcome to the Omi Show.
Oh, thank you, Omi. I'm pleased to be here. I consider myself one of the original Omi homies back when you were getting BGV launched. I remember, and it's so cool to see what's happened.
And you know, during the time that you were working at the Kauffman Foundation, the U.M. Marion Kauffman Foundation, you're one of our first believers, six-figure believers, I'll say, that really helped us scale. So, I mean, like when we talk about economic impact on millions of lives, I'm not even saying that from like a distance, like, oh yeah, over there, sometimes when you introduce people or you talk to people or you interview people, it's like, they have done this thing. It hasn't impacted me, but they did this thing. And it's not that at all. Like through the work that we do, that impact on millions of lives as well. So I just am excited to chat with you and just thank you for the time today.
Well, thank you, Omi. Thanks for everything you do.
All right. So you could be doing anything you want. You could be sailing the 7 seas. You could be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. You could be fighting, for equal rights in some other country. Why decide to be an economic growth expert? Why launch Right to Start?
Well, I guess at the core, I believe that the ability to start and do your own thing, to pursue your entrepreneurial dreams is there's nothing more fundamentally human than that, right? Like if you see something in the world that needs to be brought to life and to be able to pursue it and make it happen, everyone should be able to do that. It's sort of core to what makes us human beings, to see things that need to be built, to create them, to have the means to do it, and to have the world around you support you in doing that. So my parents actually started a business to be able to afford to put me through college. So I understand the power of entrepreneurship. I understand the power of innovation. I know how it can transform lives, not just mine and my family's, but also the jobs they created, the people around them. And they did this back in Austin, Texas. And so I saw how it transforms an entire city. The entrepreneurial economy of Austin has just exploded, and it's lifted up so many lives and transformed an entire region. So I view it as like what people do. I mean, and we've created a system that actually holds people back. And so that's what gets me is when I see all that lost opportunity. We basically leave money on the table as a society because there's talented people that want to work hard and they've got great ideas and they want to do stuff. And we have not made the system easy for them. And so that's what moves me. I mean, I'm doing the work of my life. I love this stuff and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Let's talk a little bit about your career because you've been in a few major in the philanthropic world, especially high sort of profile roles. But where did it all start? Did you wake up one day and say, you know what, I just want to provide equal opportunity for all? What did you want to be when you grow up? Like, because I think sometimes like we have these ideas or we have these thoughts and we don't know where they're rooted. And then sometimes there are people, young people out there listening who are like, maybe I want to do something with my life. I don't know what it is exactly. And people don't even know what roles are available sometimes. So I'm always curious, like where does such a career start?
You always ask such great questions, Omi. If you look, so I kind of think of it as like a river, like going upstream a river. So I guess, I was born to immigrants. I was born as the nerdy Asian kid in a small Midwestern town. I grew up in a lot of places where I didn't fit in. But when you have that perspective, you just see how unfair things are. You see imbalance. And you ask these questions like, why are some people better off than others? Why are some communities thriving and others are falling behind? Why do some people, get all the advantages and others don't? And so growing up, 16-year-old Victor, I loved like watching government television. I'm the guy that, 16 years old, I would watch the Sunday morning news shows. I just love that stuff. And I thought, well, that must be where the answer is. I've got to go into government to try to figure out how to, make things fairer for people. And so I got into government and I worked in, I went to law school. I I actually got in national politics for a while. And what I realized in government is there's great people working in government, but they're always looking to the private sector to figure out like where is stuff coming from, where is stuff headed. And not only that, they look for donations from the private sector, right? It's like the government really kind of, derives its power from the private sector. So I thought, I'm gonna go to the private sector. So I went to the private sector. I ended up practicing law. I started working in business. And then I realized actually it's not all of business that actually is what's driving stuff. There's a lot of companies that don't add new things to the economy and make things better. Some of them make things worse. Where it was the innovative businesses, the ones that were actually starting new things and trying new things out. And this was new technology. This was the internet was starting to take off. So I kept going upstream in that river. And as the further I got upstream, I realized it was the innovative entrepreneurial businesses that were actually creating stuff to make things better. And then I got into that and I thought, well, if I want to keep going upstream in the river, the problem with that is capital. And so I started my own venture studio. We started investing companies. We started starting companies. We started growing them. We'd sell them. We'd shut them down. We started getting to that business of building innovative entrepreneurial businesses. But then I got into that and just keep on going up the river. I realized actually capital is not the fundamental problem because money is everywhere. And so the problem is how do you turn money into capital? And that's a fundamentally human problem, and it's a systems problem, and it's about how it's actually about how communities function, but also what's in people's heads and their hearts, because it's how they think about the world, right? There's a lot of money lying around, to organize it into capital requires just the right mindset and the right attitude and the right structures to do it. And so going upstream, I started to go into ecosystem thinking, like how do you actually change whole systems to shift the cultural narrative and the stories that people tell, and also build the networks that actually empower everybody so everybody has a chance. And then I got into that work. And then I realized, well, where do you really get leverage on it? And I had a wonderful chance to go to the Kauffman Foundation. And as you know, the Kauffman Foundation, not everybody knows this, but has been at the front of philanthropy and entrepreneurship for about 3 decades now. And so to do that was a huge honor. And I realized it was a lever. You could actually start to drive significant change. But going up the river some more, when I got to the Kauffman Foundation, I realized there was still a deeper gap at the top of the river. And that was fundamentally, as a society, we actually ignore the starters. We ignore the people that make stuff, start stuff, grow stuff, build stuff. We take them for granted, rather. And you hear politicians will say, oh, small businesses are the backbone of the economy. But then they turn around and don't do anything about it. And it becomes this problem. And I realized that at the very heart of it, all these issues we deal with at the very front, at the very source of the river, that affects the issues of capital, that affects the issues of company formation, ecosystem development, and then economic prosperity and livelihoods and communities and prosperity as a whole. At the very source of the river is the fact that we just don't talk about it and care about it. And so you've got to change that. And so Right to Start is birthed on that idea that it's a fundamental right. It's not just a special interest group. It's not just a nice to have. It's a fundamental basic human right, and we've got to pay attention to it. We've got to nurture it. We've got to make it better. And so that's what Right to Start's about. It's fighting for that right. And honestly, I want everybody in the country and hopefully the world to realize that it's a right as basic as your right to speech and your right to worship and your right to assemble and your right to clean water and your right to good health. These are the right to start, the right to pursue your entrepreneurial dreams is as fundamental as anything else in human life. So anyways, that's how I got here. I just kept going up the river, Omi.
I love that, because what I'm hearing you say too, and I think it's important, is there's something to like proximity, right, to the problem you want to solve. So I think you start out saying, there's some people who say, I want to help people, right? And so then you start saying, oh, well, I want to help people and maybe I should volunteer, or I want to help people, maybe I should be a teacher because I like kids. I want to help people, so maybe I should work in workforce development because I care about the lower class or that pathway to middle class, upper class. Oh, I want, and I think that what we are saying as entrepreneurs is I want to solve this problem: skincare in my community, hair, health, if it's tech. And then what you do in growing your community or in getting into different roles is you gain a proximity to the problem. And so when I first met you at the eShip Summit, you were doing a talk. You did a talk about your book, The Rainforest. The book is called The Rainforest: The Secret to Building the Net Silicon Valley. Immediately, I went and bought the book and read the book. One, it's a total easy read. And I think, like, if you're trying to understand what ecosystem means, because at this time it was like ecosystem builders, you know, like, and I'm like, wait, what? I just was over here running a nonprofit, I thought. You know, and I think like the introduction of a new word really helps to help you to understand your placement in it. I think for a long time, and even when you hear traditionally, people speak about small business like backbone of America, but like, what does that mean exactly? Like, what is the placement of that to what? Like that proximity to what? What are we actually solving economically as small business owners when small business owners just see themselves as in their corner doing their thing every day, hiring people? So I wanted like some insight from you on when you think about ecosystem, right? And like all those parts. So I think for everybody listening, ecosystem is just as scientific as it sounds. Just apply to the entrepreneurial realm as well. When we say ecosystem and ecosystem building, how do you define that and really like rein it in for people who are like, I thought I was just running a business?
It's actually really simple. Well, one, I'll give you the metaphor. I use the concept of rainforests because in a rainforest, it's not like one plant is the most important plant or one animal is the most important animal. It's that it's all interdependent and everything is complex. That is, it all interacts and it interconnects with everything else. And so one business doesn't live in isolation. You have your customers, your suppliers, your friends, your partners, the capital providers, all the services you rely on as a business, all the people that come in the door. It's everything. And so when we think about how do you create prosperity for your business, for anyone's business, for a community, you can't just think about, well, we just do this one thing and it solves the problem to make it easier to start and grow a business. You've got to look at how everything interconnects and the interdependency of everything, just like in a rainforest. And so when you look at where wealth and prosperity come from, that through that lens, you realize that everyone matters, and that anyone that's not brought into the system is basically leaving opportunity on the table, and that we all have a responsibility and a role to play in making it possible. You know, every month, about 3 out of 1,000 people decide to start a business. And the question is, you know, part of it's what do the 3 do? But we know those 3 are hustling. They're working at it. It's not like they can work harder. You know, people work very hard when they're starting something. It's what are the other 997 people doing to make those 3 succeed? And that's just not a question that we've asked ourselves that much. Like, what are we as 997 doing to help the 3? Because we just generally tend to think of it as something that it's other people's problems, but it's all of our problems. And so that's what the ecosystem is. It's how does everything interconnect and interact to make people succeed? Because we need those new ideas and new services and new products brought into our lives to make all of our lives better.
Do you think that so one of the things about your journey that I think about is like you left this major, huge, like high profile organization, wealthy, philanthropic, amazing company, right? Like you left the Kauffman Foundation and you decided, I'm going to start this thing. Do you think that like somewhere the right to start is also a mindset and a frame of kind of like what people feel like they can do? Or like, and how much does that play into systematic barriers around what you feel like you can do versus what you actually can do?
It's both, right? It all interacts with each other. So yes, a big part of it is what are our self-limiting beliefs in terms of what's possible, and you definitely see that, and that's a big part of the challenge today. Is a lot of people are, because entrepreneurship has been in decline for the last 45 years. People don't know this generally. Like if you look at the data, this is census data, so over the last 45 years, the rate of entrepreneurial activity in our economy is about half what it was 45 years ago. So we've been in this slow decline over time. It's not like there was one moment where it all fell apart. It's just been in a slow decline. And meanwhile, we know that entrepreneurs generate almost all net job growth in an economy. It's not the big companies, it's not the old companies, it's the new businesses that are generating the new jobs. And so we know how important it is, yet what's happened is that we don't really talk about it as a society. You hardly hear about new businesses and the importance of new businesses in the news or in the political talks or in the talk shows, other than this great talk show. And so what's happened is the leaders of our society, and this is not something that was anyone's fault in particular,
Oh
but
yeah.
the way they run the economy is, and if you read the news, you see it, it's implicit in all of it, is that only the big old companies matter. And 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 the new little ones are kind of irrelevant. But if you look at where the jobs come from, you look at where wealth comes from, you look at where incomes come from, you look at how to fight inequality, you look at how to fight poverty, it's the new young businesses that are far more important than the big old businesses. But if you read the news and you listen to politicians and you think about where the lobby money flows to influence our policymakers, it's the big old businesses that control that. And so we've got to rebalance that. It's not like big old businesses aren't important. They provide a lot of the basic needs and functions of our lives. But you need to have the new young ones. It's in a constant balance. It's an ecosystem, right? Like a rainforest. You need the old trees, but you need the new trees and the new plants sprouting up too to keep it all in balance with each other. And right now we've got it out of balance. There's just too much emphasis on the big old trees and not enough on the new weeds that are sprouting up.
What do you think about people just not trusting that new businesses will last, so they just don't feel like it's worth it to think about new businesses, right? Like it's like that's the feeling I get, I think, sometimes when I'm moving through, like, talking through with BGV, talking to different people across different sectors. It's just like the newer companies they're discarded because it's like, oh well, they'll, if they make it to be the big company, then we'll talk to them. If they make it to be the mid-sized company, then we'll talk to them. But what are your thoughts on, like, well, what happens? So entrepreneurship being on a decline. Let's say it comes to a halt. Nobody started anything. Tomorrow we wake up and nobody out of those 3,000 people, everybody just doesn't do anything. They don't start a business. What does that kind of world look like?
It's a world of decline. It's a world of stagnation, a world of lower jobs, lower wealth, lower human fulfillment. And you're right. I've been I'm in these conversations, and folks really tick me off when they say this. I actually have people still come to me, even with Right to Start, and will say, well, Victor, it's great you're doing Right to Start and you're trying to look at entrepreneurial opportunity for everybody. But you and I know, Victor, like Right, like it's really only the tech businesses and the fast growing venture backed businesses that really matter, right? All the other stuff, it's nice, but it's really not as important as the fast growing tech businesses. And it's like, how can people think that? Because it implies a level of presumptuousness to think that they know in advance what's going to be that great new business, right? How do you know? If you look at the great companies of today, no one knew. I mean, Apple was started as like a bunch of greasy guys in a garage. Facebook is started in a dorm room as like some like social experiment. Twitter was started by a bunch of friends by accident. Uber was started by a group of friends, and none of them actually wanted to run the company and be like a taxi dispatch service. Like, no one knows. And there was this company, I don't know if you've had Dots Pretzels before, but the story of Dots Pretzels, it's like everywhere now. But it was founded in a small town of about 1,000 people by a woman in North Dakota. And she just saw that the pretzels that people were bringing to their parties were terrible. And so she made up her own pretzel recipe. And so she started making it for her friends and family and neighbors, and it just started to grow. 10 years later, she sells it for over $1 billion to Hershey's. It's like responsible for half of all pretzel sales growth in America right now.
Wow.
And she started it in her kitchen, making a better pretzel recipe, right? What you tell me, is that a worthwhile, innovative tech company, or is that a company that is just making better things for society and no one would have known in advance? And so the point is, you've got to give everyone a chance. You don't know. And we've created a system of putting others as gatekeepers to say they know. And the truth is, they don't know. And you've got to give everyone a chance, because that's just the way it works. And that's the way, natural forests work too. Like redwood trees, people look at redwood forests and say, well, it's beautiful. We've got these redwood forests. You know how many seeds that a redwood forest tree lays out uh, per century, and how you need to have one tree per century that emerges out of every tree that's already there, because trees die off. Like trees die off every century. Other trees die off; they got to replenish them every century. Trees can live for hundreds of years, but 1 billion seeds will yield one redwood tree. Now,
What?
would you say, like, well, then we don't need to? Those other seeds don't matter. You wouldn't say that, because you need all of them doing their thing to let that one figure its way out, right?
Mm,
And that's the
wow.
problem, is we've looked at it and said, well, let's decide that's the one, and we're just going to let that one live and the other ones not make it. And in a forest, you got to let all of them take their chance, because you just don't know. And that 1 out of 1 billion is the one that actually becomes the next great redwood tree and saves the forest from collapsing. So that's the
Wow.
way I look at it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Hold that thought. We're gonna come right back, because I'm also curious as to like what some of the rejections are to this idea. Like, what are some of the like what are people pushing back on exactly? And to dig into that kind of psychology a little bit. But hold that thought. We got to go to a quick break. Listen, I'm here with Victor Hwang. We have an amazing conversation about economic development, and about his new campaign, Right to Start. Hold that thought, Victor, because I want to hear so much more. Everybody, don't change that dial. Stay right here. We'll be right back. You listen to the Omi Show. I'm Omi Bell. Keep it locked. And we're back. I'm here with Victor Hwang, and we are having an amazing conversation about economic development, about his campaign, Right to Start, and just about entrepreneurship in general. I think this conversation is so important because you're out there, you're starting a business and you're working. And, that's just like the tree in the forest may not know what's going on with the other trees, right? Like, it's just kind of doing its thing, and it's trying to be the best it can be and grow as tall as it can grow and put off as much oxygen as like it's trying to just do its thing. And I was just saying to Victor during the break that people don't understand too that like we have to pitch to other people too. So people may be pitching to us, but we're also doing the work of pitching to other people for funding, but not just for funding, but the understanding of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to push forward. I think that's why gatekeepers are developed, because when people think they have figured it out, they're like, well, I'm gonna just stay here. Like, I don't want nobody else to come in, because I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna just try to do my thing with the people who already know what I have and what I'm doing. And I don't have to keep making the case to new people. I'm curious about some of the pushback you've gotten around the Right to Start campaign. Like, what are some ways that people are like, I don't understand this. I don't know why you're doing it. Just, I love what you said about it. Like, Victor, you and we know that is an interesting place to be as well, and just kind of sit through some of those conversations, which can be grueling.
Yeah.
But what kind of pushback are you getting?
Well, it's funny. In the beginning, the pushback was like, "Oh, well, we don't really need that, right? Like, we already have like all these small business representation groups and lobbying groups and all that." And that was one like common feedback in the beginning. And I thought, no, we don't. They're talking about a small business as like a special interest group, like looking for like handouts or tax cuts or whatever. And we're talking about it as a right. Because here's the thing: is like they're and I've seen this now. I've done this work for well over 2 decades now, and uh, every year it's like this hamster wheel of like, oh yeah, we got to fight for like this special tax cut in this state, and dozens of people will work on that little thing that benefits like 30 companies, right, in a state, and it just never ends. But when you talk about it as a basic right, now it's not about a little special interest group looking for its little lobbying handout, which is not what entrepreneurship is about at all. It's about a basic right that cuts across how do you set up educational systems? How do you design schools so kids learn the right things? How to, so they can have the ability to start and grow their own business when they get a high school diploma? How do you design workforce training systems so we don't waste $13 billion every year subsidizing large corporations to train people up on skills
Mm.
that companies could be paying for themselves? How do you redesign economic development so we're not just subsidizing large companies to move from one state to another, and we're actually trying to build homegrown businesses. Tax policy, regulatory policy, uh, uh, universities, community colleges, government contracts, non-compete restrictions. I mean, there's so many aspects of
Mm,
the world
yeah.
that we live in that you don't even think about, but it affects like entrepreneurship. And so education's a great example of it. Like, people can go all the way K through 12, get a high school diploma. The day after they get that high school diploma, are they capable of building and doing their own thing? They're completely dependent on applying to someone else to give them a job.
Yeah.
We haven't actually built self-sufficiency and a sense of agency into the way we design education. And that's essentially what I'm talking about, which is the narrative, the story we tell our society about ourselves is, it's really for the big companies. We're all here. We're trained up to become like workers for big companies, as opposed to giving you the tools to, create your own thing in life. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have the skills to be in a big company too. I've learned a lot from big institutions and big companies, and people often move back and forth between them. But you need to have both. You need to have that self-efficacy so you can do anything. So you can become that weed that grows into a giant tree in the forest. You don't have to just go ask that other big tree to give you a job. You should be able to create your own tree in the forest.
Mm.
And we have not built a system like that.
No, I think that's right. And I think the idea of it's not all or nothing. It's I think like this is another thing. Our government moves off of emergency and then moves off of you can't do that, you gotta do this. You can't do that no more. You gotta do this. And that is super scary for all the conservative people out there. And when I say conservative, I'm not talking about a party, right? I'm talking about literally high net worth folks, even the executives at the big corporations. Like there's a lot of conservative folks. I would even say inherently Black people are typically mostly conservative. I think but it's interesting because like this idea of scares being afraid. So it's like if I got to jump from one cliff to the other, there's no bridging or kind of like tying together, or even just rope the cliff and pull it closer. I think like nobody thinks of it that way. We're all thinking. I don't like to say build a bridge because I feel like you can build a bridge and people don't walk across it. That still doesn't mean anything. So I think I'm going to start introducing rope the cliff closer. I think I'm going to do that. I usually say raise the average, don't build a bridge, meaning like if you look around and the average number of women in the room is low, then just invite some more women. I think to simplify it. But some of the things you said there that really stuck out to me was about self-sufficiency and agency. We are not yet in our education system teaching self-sufficiency and agency. And that's like the number one thing you get from entrepreneurship. There's not even, yeah,
It's the power to, like you mentioned 3 years ago, I left Kaufman and I said, I want to start this thing. And, we launched it, in the middle of the pandemic, and 2.5 years later, we have a footprint in 21 states. We got a team of 25 people and we're growing. It's just a different attitude, right? It's a mindset that says there's something to create and there's a science on how to do it, and you got to learn the science of it. But the science is secondary to the heart and the attitude. Like if you've got the heart and the attitude, you can figure this stuff out. It is not that hard. I mean, it's hard, but it's not that hard, right? You can teach this stuff. You can learn this stuff. There are tons of people around that want to help you and teach you. There's limitless resources, but people don't know, and it's become part of our there is a fear that's baked into everyday life. And because entrepreneurship has been in decline, it actually feeds on itself, because that means fewer and fewer people have been exposed to what it means to start and do your own thing. And that sense of agency, actually human beings learn through replicating and modeling others, right? We actually look at examples around us. We watch the movies, we watch shows, we listen to friends or family and say, I would like to be that someday. I'd like to do that. When there's fewer entrepreneurs around, you have fewer and fewer role models, and it just feeds. It gets worse and worse and worse, and that's what a lot of the data shows, which is that the majority of people who think of start a business never are even able to find someone that's been in that business to talk to them about how to do it, and so being able to learn how to do it from others is really key. And we've got to reverse that decline, because there's a cyclical effect to all this stuff. Like
Mm.
if you can get that wheel spinning of people seeing how it's done, learning how it's done, being encouraged to do it, and getting benefit of others to help them along the way, then it's like a flywheel that gets faster and faster. And so I think that's where the opportunity is. We've got to turn that around across as an entire society.
It's crazy because it's like, this is economic development, right? It's not a nice to have, like you said. And you would think that, like, our government has these economists around them who are predicting, things like the new majority, by 2044 will be majority people of color in the US, who are predicting the kind of like, hey, well, if the stock market keeps going this way, this thing is going to happen. Why do you think they just can't get this part? You know what I mean? Like it's so weird to me that, like, I say all the time, we can send people into space, but we can't figure out diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just don't, I don't, that's mind boggling to me. I don't understand that. how can we design a whole spaceship, shuttles, satellites, and we can be, orbiting around in the space that we don't know, right? In the unknown, but we cannot figure out diversity, equity, inclusion. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. But what are your thoughts on, like, why, even with all the economic intelligence around people, it's just people are not really budging on this, in a way. What are your thoughts? I mean, not to say they're not budging. Let me say, you're clearly in 21 states. So not to say your campaign specifically, but I just mean in general, it doesn't feel like a big overturn of, like, yes, we need to focus on small businesses. What do you think it is?
Yeah, it's like, why does this problem even exist in the first place? Like, it
Right.
shouldn't be that hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was just watching this documentary about the Mars shots, like the Mars Opportunity rover, and some guy said it was like hitting a golf ball from Los Angeles to hitting the doorknob of a hotel in London, and that's what it takes to launch like a rocket to Mars. They do it like over and over again, and we can't solve this stuff. We can't solve like inclusive economies. We can't solve like empowering entrepreneurs in our own economy. I mean, right? It's self-inflicted wounds here. This is not literally not rocket science. It's all basic stuff. I've concluded it's because we take it for granted, because America has convinced itself we're so awesome, right? We are the startup nation. We are, the special nation. We are so entrepreneurial, and it is true. This country has a remarkable story to tell, but it's never done with a story because it's always in constant reinvention mode. And the story, I think, it's like when you believe your own press. Like this country believes its own press. It thinks the country thinks it's all that. But what happens is when you do that, you ignore the basic problem, which is it's withering, right? Because we made it so much harder. And so you look at we did a poll at Right to Start where we got two of the top national pollsters, bipartisan, one on the left and one on the right, to do this great poll with us. And things like simple, like half of the people who think of starting a business and don't start a business say it's in part due to government fees and forms and red tape. They even can't figure out how to navigate all that stuff. That's a self-inflicted wound, right? So if you extrapolate that, that's like 15 million new businesses that weren't created because we just made it too hard to even figure out the paperwork, and we made it too expensive to get started. Like, you got to ask these questions. Why are we actually making people pay for the right to create their own job? Like, we should be paying them. Like, we're making people pay fees. And in the US, it costs over, on average, $800 to create a business. Just the fees, just the processes alone. Half the country doesn't have savings, right? They live paycheck to paycheck. So if you're saying $800 is the average cost to start a business, you've effectively said to half the country, we don't care about your ability to create your own job and to create jobs for more people. And it's just because people in privilege, people in power don't realize that this is a serious problem. That $800 for a lot of people is prohibitive. You've basically said they don't have the right to create their own thing in life. Or worse yet, we have other programs that loan them money to do it, to pay the fees. We have other programs that loan them money to pay the fees that the government takes back, right? And now it's just, people haven't thought through it. It doesn't make sense, and we need to fix that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, it is, how do you say hopeful? I think I'm a serial optimist. Okay. So I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. I'm like, they say we can't. Yes, we can. You know, like I'm just that person. I'm born and bred that way. I think after succeeding so many times and defying so many odds and, you know, no people not thinking I would be where I am. I think I'm just now wired to be like, psh, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. You know, you can't see what I can see. And I'm going to keep pressing for that. I think that is a huge part of it for me. But what is it for you? Like, how do you stay hopeful? You have so much knowledge. You've been a part of so many sectors. You know, deeply in this from a politics side and from a philanthropy side. What keeps you hopeful?
Because because there's a path, and I see what's happening, which is people are waking up because they realize that the old system isn't working for most people. It's not working for all of us. It's not working for the whole system. And people are waking up, and there's a path forward. And I've seen just in the last 2.5 years, this movement with Right to Start, how far we've come. Two years ago, we had one legislator who was inspired to file a Right to Start Act. It was a bill to promote entrepreneurship across multiple things. It was like a comprehensive pro-entrepreneur reform bill to make it easier for everyone to start and build a business. And he's from a rural district, and he's a Republican, and he saw the issue in these small towns, and he got it through the Missouri House for the first time with the vote of the Black progressive Democrats from places like Ferguson, Missouri. And here's the thing: is that was 2 years ago. This year we have 6 states already that have filed Right to Start acts. We have 4 that are drafting them. We've got about 8 more that are talking about it right now. And 2 weeks ago, I was in another state and was talking to a coalition of the same kind of people. It's like small town conservatives and urban progressive liberals saying the same thing, which is the system's broken. We need to make it easier for people to have a sense of self-agency, self-efficacy. They need to be able to start and build their own businesses. And it's universal, right? We're seeing movement now. And we've had our Right to Start Act policies adopted as model legislation now. The Council of State Governments South region has adopted it. We've had a conservative group named the American Legislative Exchange Councils that's adopted as model legislation. But it's bipartisan. We've seen groups, we've been working with groups across the aisle to do this, and they're seeing eye to eye in a time when it's a very polarized time, right? Like people don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. But on this thing they do, and people have asked me, how are you getting this to happen? And I'll tell you the simplest answer, which is the answer you can give to every entrepreneur in America. You just show up. Like we're showing up in these state houses. We're talking to legislators. We're talking to city council people. We're talking to mayors. We show up and they say, wow, you mean we can do something about this problem? You know, one, thanks for letting us know about the problem. Thanks for the data. Thanks for sharing the stories. We can do something. And it's like, yes, there are things you can do. And they're thrilled because this is a polarizing time when they don't even have anything to work on together because they're told that they've got to fight each other all the time.
Yeah.
And we have found that when you talk about these issues, you give them the policy ideas which cut across party lines, they eat it up because there's a lot of public servants that are really eager to do good things and want to help, and they haven't been given a chance to do it. And we're giving them things to do and to work on and giving them ideas, and they're thrilled because, you know, there are enough people who care to do it, and that's what gives me hope. And I'm seeing the momentum, and that's not just from the policymakers, it's from the grassroots entrepreneurs who are talking to them, who are lifting their voices up, giving voice to these issues in a way that has never been done before. And so that gives me hope. America is never perfect, but it's a system that lets itself try to correct itself constantly, right? There's ability to keep on trying to fix itself. And it's like a never-ending search to get better, which is what makes this country unique. In other countries, it's like, what does the king say? And what does the leader say?
Right.
In this country, it's like, what do we say? And what can we do? And that's just different in this country. It's just a unique place that lets us take a shot and keep on trying to fix things. because you're never done fixing things. And I think that's what gives me hope, because I've seen the progress already, and I know the people on the ground. And I took a road trip a few months back. I actually drove from DC to KC. I'm living in Kansas City now, and I actually saw half the country. I went through 8 states and visited entrepreneurs in little rooms in suburbs to like community gatherings of 30 people to everything in between, and from everything from small towns to urban centers to uh, pretty much every type of entrepreneur you can imagine. And it was so inspiring because they saw the same issues, they're fixing the same problems, and they don't even know that we're all talking the same thing. Like
Right.
they didn't even know, and I'm seeing it all. And I think this country is on the very verge of a renewal, and I'm seeing it.
Mm.
There's a reform
Wow.
process happening. There's a renewal process as we come out of the pandemic. People are waking up.
I think that's right. And you know what? You're the right person for it. So I'm so excited about the work you're doing with Right to Start. Right to Start, a campaign to fight to expand entrepreneurial opportunity for all. I really love this. Thank you so much for joining us, Victor. We could talk all night about this. I mean, is there anything else you want to make sure that our audience knows before we end the interview?
Well, people can participate in this effort. So what we're going to do at Right to Start is make it something where everyone that wants to have a voice and say in matters has that voice and say. So go to the Right to Start website, righttostart.org, and sign up for the newsletter, sign up for membership. Right now, it's free to join. Join and be part of it. We need every voice as part of this movement. We hope you and your members will join us on this journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is really insightful and informative. And just thank you for fighting for a new right, right? Like, who knew after all these years that we needed this right? You did, and you brought it to life. And so I really appreciate that in your work.
Well,
Thank you so
thank you,
much.
Omi. You're amazing what you do in inspiring people, teaching them skills, giving them resources to build businesses. It's just inspiring to watch you. And I feel honored to know you. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.